So great to have you. On the panel, we have Andrew, Jan and Benedict, and also Tyler. I'm not going to steal their thunder by saying much more about them, because I think you're the best people to contextualize and give your own perspective as to where you are and how you come to this topic. And without further ado, Andrew, can I invite you to start and share with us?
Thanks very much, Margaret. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. I think I know one or two of you, so hello to those whom I know already. So I'm Andrew Foreshew-Cain. I'm the chaplain of Lady Margaret Hall in Oxford. Just going to start my timer so I don't do more than 3 minutes. Chaplain of Lady Margaret Hall at Oxford, and I've only been there a year, which meant I had one full term in Michaelmas term, the autumn term, and then towards the end of the winter term, things started to go sort of pear-shaped, as we all experienced with the coronavirus. So I was only really beginning to get my feet under the table and to find my feet in a complex institution. Lady Margaret Hall has 600 students, undergraduates and graduates. It's a residential community in North Oxford. Pretty much the majority of students live on site. Certainly all the undergraduates live on site if they want to do so, and most do. And we have a chapel at the centre of it, and regular worship with a choir of choir scholars who sing evensong, traditional Book of Common Prayer evensong, every Sunday evening. I suppose the other thing to say about Lady Margaret Hall is that although it has a kind of Anglican foundation, it's independent of the Church of England, which is why I'm working there rather than anywhere else. And although it has that chaplaincy role, it's a decidedly secular institution. So technically, as chaplain, I'm not officially involved in welfare. That was removed from the chaplain some time ago because it was felt that sort of white middle-aged men with dog collars, which is generally what it had been, a bit like me really, probably weren't the most relevant in the life of our rather diverse student body. That said, I am gradually working my way back into chaplaincy because I'm rather different from my predecessors. Welcoming community. I think that I'm not sure I'm here to learn as much as you do about how we rebuild community in this new world. I just want to acknowledge a couple of things straight up. And the first of all is the disorientation that I'm pretty sure that we're all feeling at the moment, because we've lost stuff that we value and we're familiar with. And I think we have to be honest to admit that that is difficult. There's a sense of loss of regular patterns of worship and behaving and relating to students, which is difficult. And also that because our students are no longer on site at LMH, and sure in your experience as well, there's a real concern in my heart for the fact that quite a lot of our students have just sort of vanished off the radar. So in LMH previously, walking around the campus, I would see nearly all the students all the time, be able to say hello and greet them. All of that has vanished. Our eating together in hall has vanished. That's my time up. Our eating together in hall has vanished. Our meeting together of an evening for social events has all vanished as well. And that's a real challenge. The only thing I would say that I have found helpful is to try not to be too worried about the fact that we're not in the regular contact we are with students in the past, but to provide opportunities for them to contact us. So I, during term, was running a weekly sort of drop-in session, which was advertised to all the students. So for them to come along and meet and talk. To be honest, that pretty much didn't happen, but the fact that I was there and was waiting for people, some students did comment on that being helpful. Margaret, what do you want me to do? Because I've had 3 minutes and I don't think I've said anything. I've got loads more I wanted to say, but what am I going to do? You want me to shut up?
One key point and then we'll shut you up.
Okay, this is Freddie, by the way. The other key point I would be is don't always concentrate on the students. I've been hosting staff seminars, staff coffee mornings every day during term time, sorry. And a big part of my ministry this last term has been working with students, with the staff who are on furlough and worried about their futures in college. So I think that's a big part of what our futures are going to be, not just the students, but with the staff. Thank you, that's it.
Thanks, Andrew. I think that's just a useful contextualization of kind of where you're coming from and what you've been dealing with that I'm sure has echoes for many of us. Jan, and maybe you can hand over to Benedict rather than me introducing him as we go, as you're both at Aston University, but your perspective, your thoughts?
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Scott. I'm one of the Free Church chaplains at Aston University. And as you know, every university is different, every chaplaincy is different, and Aston couldn't be more different from Lady Margaret Hall, I think. We are a city centre university in Birmingham, and as you know, Birmingham's a very diverse city, and I guess the demographic of students reflects that. We are a very diverse student body with a high proportion of students living at home, which has implications for welcome. Very often the home students don't feel that Freshers' Week is for them. We are a secular university, but in response to the demographic, we have a multi-faith chaplaincy with, I think 8 or 9 chaplains of different faiths, some of them on campus and paid, others are voluntary and are less frequently on campus. However, the input is there should we need it from each of the faiths. The chaplaincy building is right at the centre of campus, so passing trade is good for us. Whenever we have events, we can just stand at the door and encourage people to come in. It also potentially means that we can use outside space, and I mention this because it might be relevant later on in our discussion of what we can do for Freshers' Week. We don't have a chapel or a regular act of worship, but we do use the multi-purpose space for weekly prayers, attended mainly by staff. In addition to that, Aston does not have a coordinating chaplain. Our line manager Benedict, who you'll hear from in just a moment, is part of the student services team. And this system works well for us. So, as for all of us, Freshers' Week is very important to get that first group of students in and familiar with the building and to recognise the chaplains so that they can come back at any other time of the academic year. But as with everybody, hospitality involves food and soft drinks, teas, coffees, and that is a challenge at this particular time. So with those challenges, I'm going to hand over to Benedict to explain a bit more of what the university will let us do and what they will encourage us to do. So over to you, Benedict.
Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everyone. It's always a privilege to be asked to speak at events like this. I sort of, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I like to say that I'm a sort of representative of the soulless, secular, bureaucratic administration. But in truth, I really see my job as to enable the work of the chaplaincy and to really kind of fly the flag for it within the university structures. My background actually is philosophy and theology. I have a master's degree in Christian theology, and my father was a vicar in the Church of England. So I see myself as a sort of Trojan horse in some ways, representing the chaplaincy team by sitting on all sorts of exciting and not so exciting university committees and finding ways that the chaplaincy can feed into the work of the university. I think in terms of the themes of today, in terms of welcome and community, Jan made the very good point about the peculiarities of the Aston demographic. I've got our student equalities report here, and I know that in the 2017-18 academic year, 25% of our students identified as Christian, 25% of our students identified as Muslim, and just under a third of our students identified as no religion. So it is quite a broad spectrum, and the sort of second sort of runners up under those with sort of Hindu and Sikh populations. So it is quite a broad demographic. The most effective way in I've found in the current climate, and the way that I think I'm going to encourage our chaplaincy team to operate, is to really build those bridges with the mental well-being teams, with the mental health and counselling teams. And a lot of our emphasis this year in our Welcome Week is going to be around events that can support student well-being. And we're offering a sort of blended Welcome Week program where we're going to have some events on campus, but then also digital versions of those events as well for the students who don't want to or can't attend. So Jan will be leading on meditation and mindfulness. We're going to try and offer some form of laughter yoga, various sessions. But really it's going to be about building those links with the other internal teams to say, how can we support work around student well-being? I don't know if that touches on everything you wanted to hear.
Thanks, Benedict. I think that frames quite well where things are up to in Aston in terms of the thinking forward into Welcome Week, into new students, and into how you see some routes in for Jan and the team there to engage. Can I turn to Tyler, who I think is going to bring a different perspective again to this conversation?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, obviously I don't have a whole lot of experience in chaplaincy, but I do feel like I kind of have a good understanding of the pulse of what's going on with a lot of the students. So I kind of come to this discussion with that perspective. So a little background about me. I'm currently a postgraduate student at Central St. Martin's here in London. I'm studying industrial design. Originally, I'm from the United States. I'm from Oregon, over on the West Coast. My background's actually in electrical engineering and business. So I kind of sit at this interesting cross section between business, design, and engineering, which has been really interesting. It's kind of given me a lot of perspectives in a lot of different areas. I'm currently a member at KXC, King's Cross Church here in London. Now, this past year, I've been kind of focused on community development. That's really what I've been building my degree around, and looking at kind of what's the best way to match needs and resources around a community, and just kind of tracking trends that are happening among like students in my generation and kind of the generations around me. And some of the big things that I noticed have been kind of growing, even pre-pandemic, was one, just kind of this deluge of information. We have so much information that's thrown at us, especially in the United States. We see this mix of like misinformation and kind of like twisted information, and just so much information. And students and kind of people my age have been trying to figure out what's the best way to like navigate all this information. We've seen that just exemplified now in the pandemic, when there's just so much like scientific information and government information, and all of this stuff is just kind of being thrown at us, and we're constantly consuming all of this information and not quite sure how to navigate it. On top of that, social isolation obviously has been a growing issue. Even pre-pandemic, we saw social isolation on the rise, especially in cities. Like, even though there's so many people, connecting with other students and getting to know new people has definitely been hard. And obviously is even more hard now when there's not as many physical places to meet up. So that's been something that's been kind of a rising issue in the student community. And then finally, this idea of these wicked problems, these problems that our communities are facing, aren't quite like black and white, even though like the media and a lot of these different sources kind of show them as more black and white. But there's a lot of these kind of just underlying issues that are causing these things, and students are trying to figure out kind of like where do they fall and what are different ways they can help. Especially with like systemic racism over in the US, we see a lot of students are trying to figure out like what are ways that they can support, what are ways they can help out, kind of what's the best way to address these things. And all this to just kind of say like there's a lot on the students' plate. I mean, just like everyone else, but we're all trying to figure out kind of how to navigate these new times, how to navigate these new issues, how to navigate all of this information, how to navigate the social isolation that's coming up with it. And I think that really presents a lot of opportunities, whether that be for chaplaincy or student support services or whatever it be, but just to find different ways to help students navigate these times, to basically say like, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you find community. I'm here to help connect you with the resources you're looking for, here to help you kind of navigate all of this information, and really just kind of be there for you in the ups and downs as you try to navigate this new space. And so that's kind of some of the big things I've been hearing in the student community and around it. I think it's a tricky time, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for growth here and a lot of opportunities to really kind of address what's on the students' hearts these days. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler, and thanks to all our panelists. We're going to have a time now of just some questions from me to the panelists, and if anybody has got any burning questions they'd like to add to the chat, there's an interesting conversation going on in there at the moment about the best platforms to engage people on, if you want to join that. A question from me to all our panelists, and you can jump in whatever order. In this hybrid, blended, mixed mode world, what do you see as the opportunities, and what do you think you're going to need to let go of to avail of those? Who'd like to kick off? I'm going to pick on Jan because you're not on mute.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think the opportunities potentially are that we get more people engaging online. Certainly our staff prayers, we have had more people come and join us with that. With my mindfulness sessions for staff, more and more people have come. So potentially that could happen with students too. And in the past, I've known of students who've really not wanted to come into the chaplaincy, but they might actually engage online. In terms of letting go, perhaps it's letting go of all that pizza and that cafe style of interaction. I mean, at Aston, it might be possible to serve drinks and biscuits outside. You know, there could be ways around that, but essentially we're not going to sit in a little huddle around a table and chat. We're going to do it differently. So, you know, that's the tricky bit as far as I can see.
Andrew, you look like you're ready to jump in.
There's a couple of comments online about meetings on the chat thing about having meetings with students and students not wanting meetings. One of the things I was doing during the summer, which Sarah Farrow put me onto, was producing a sort of standalone meditation or standalone service, which on a web page, which we put up on our Facebook and on the chapel website, which meant that people could just access it anytime they wanted to without anyone else having to be there. And I was really surprised at the number of people that used those. And actually, Sarah's great at doing tutorials for this kind of stuff. So if you want to ask Sarah how to do it, do. And actually, once you've got under your belt how to use new technology, like making a basic meditation format or a basic service format, you can just change it every week and put it up. And lots of people have been using that. And it makes things much more accessible for people rather than just having a set time or a set place as it used to be before all of this happened. And I think that's been very helpful in our context.
Yeah, and I think probably, Margaret, I'd just chip in and say a number of people have been using informal coffee type drop-ins. One colleague who works in school chaplaincy found herself doing a great deal of work with staff, and the catalyst for that was titling it Coffee, Cake and a Cry, because that just seemed to capture the things that people wanted. They wanted a chance to meet, they wanted some comfort, and they also needed and wanted a chance to talk about things that really mattered. Numbers varied a lot. Sometimes you might get a dozen, sometimes it was you, your cat and one other person. But it just seemed to hit a note, and I think that some colleagues have been doing similar things. Informal, just drop in, there's no agenda, and the prompt for it is, who can you talk to?
Thanks, Garry. Benedict or Tyler, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, there's all very good points that have been raised so far, and I think there's just a couple of things I would add, again coming at it from that kind of slightly more administrative student services perspective, many of your home institutions, no doubt, will be furiously pulling together what virtual blended induction looks like in September. And I would say here and now, there's a real opportunity, if you can find the right people, the people that are charged with coordinating that, to come along and say, look, we have an offer and we have things that we can contribute to this. Because I think there's a lot of universities that are sort of very concerned about what sort of welcome experience they'll be giving to new students in September, whether that's wholly online, a blended approach, or however that looks. And I think any team or service that comes along and says, you know, we have something we'd like to offer to this, we can make your welcome timetable look more full, will be gratefully received. And I think that's the opportunity there. So certainly I've in the somewhat unique position in the last few weeks of having colleagues come to me and say, hey, you know, what's the chaplaincy doing for welcome, or can you come up with some events? And in fact, in some respects, their reach has exceeded their grasp. I mean, they've asked us to run some quite big events on campus, which due to COVID-19 restrictions and social distancing, we can't actually do. But it was nice that they thought of us. And so we were able to say, well, look, you know, we can't run pizza night, as Jan quite rightly points out, but hey, you know what, we can do X, Y, and Z. So I think there's a unique opportunity now that the current climate gives you to kind of make those links and get yourself on the map in a way that previously might have been more difficult. Thanks,
Benedict. Tyler.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to jump off that a little bit. I think Sarah and I were talking about this a little bit last week. I think there's an opportunity with Welcome Weeks, especially in this climate where like students are trying to figure out what to connect to. They don't really know what's available out there, what sorts of events there are, what different organizations there are. And these Welcome Weeks, oftentimes there's just so much being kind of thrown at you and you're not really sure like what's going to click or what's going to work. But I think there's this opportunity almost to be like a middleman and help students find like the different groups they connect with, kind of help them sift through all of the stuff that's going on. I think that's going to be even harder this year when most things are probably going to be thrown at students online and all that information is not necessarily going to be in one spot. I think there potentially is an opportunity, whether it's through you guys or through another source, to help students really sift through that and figure out kind of what communities they can connect with. And we weren't really sure like what that looks like. And I think it kind of takes some more thought, but I definitely feel like there's a need there for somebody to kind of help, or some way for students to help sift through all of the welcome information and groups that'll be trying to pitch to them in the fall.
Thanks, Tyler. And I think you helped bounce into something that Andrew raised earlier as well, which is, I think for many of us, while we see the opportunities online, whether it's Zoom, Teams, Skype, however glitchy they are or they are not, but there's also a worry about what about those students that we don't bump into anymore? They're not on campus as much, they're not hanging around, or we're not hanging around the corridors. Any of the panel got any thoughts about, you know, do we need to let go of that anxiety and do what we can, or actually is there any way to tackle it?
I guess, speaking from my experience working collaboratively with our counselling team, they find it very difficult with the new world of not having those face-to-face kind of high-value interactions. And one of the interesting things that they've discovered around trying to run a virtual counselling service is just how awkward and how suboptimal it can be for students to have very intense conversations in the family home, and that idea of maybe there isn't that sort of privacy that they have on campus. Now, I don't necessarily have a solution for that, but I think it's just one of those things which is obvious in hindsight, but I'd never considered how difficult it could be for students to have the kind of conversations that they'd have in a confidential one-to-one setting in a counselling office or in the chaplaincy, as opposed to one house with a family computer or a bedroom with not very thick walls. And that's just something, that's not really a solution, it's just something that I hadn't fully appreciated until now.
Andrew, any thoughts?
Sorry, I'm chatting to people on the chat thing, so I missed that last bit of conversation. Apologies. I will stop chatting to people on the chat thing and put a little bit more. Apologies.
it's that anxiety around lost students. Do we?
Oh, right. Yes. So, I mean, one of the things I've noticed, and one of the things I'm concerned about, is the fact that those contacts that you would have day by day with your students in college, they have all just vanished. And I'm particularly concerned about what our students are experiencing at home. And particularly, I don't know whether many of you have experience of independent students, because we have a significant number of them at LMH, people who don't have homes to go to. So trying to, and for whom lockdown has been particularly difficult, trying to provide welfare support and pastoral care for students, one of whom, I mean, we have them living on boats. We have one student who every time they need to do their work, they have to go out of their house and piggyback on the Wi-Fi from McDonald's while standing under a bridge. Yeah, it's keeping in touch with people like that for whom the home situation is extremely difficult. That is a major concern. And I'm not sure I have any easy answers to that, other than being very try and know who your most vulnerable students are, and make sure that you contact them in a variety of ways. Certainly, that's what the welfare team at LMH does. Is doing a very good job of staying in touch with people. But then again, our community is only 350 undergraduates, so it's a much smaller body than most of you are dealing with.
Tyler, any views on that from kind of your perspective?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think it's the best thing you can do is kind of just create as many opportunities as possible for people to engage, and you can't really force people to engage. And I think a lot of people are just going to kind of recede to their homes. I know we were talking about this a little bit before the call started. But yeah, just reducing as many of the barriers of entry as possible. So it's whether you've got a couple days a week where you've got a Zoom room open and people can just kind of drop in and chat, or if you have like sessions you could book on a calendar, trying to create some physical events like at a park if you can, or just some places people can drop in, as well as for like some online things, if you're doing like Zoom webinars or meetings or things, allowing an option of anonymity. So we saw a lot of people are like checking out church services because they're not necessarily like, they can kind of sit in the back and nobody necessarily like knows they're there because they're on a Zoom call. They don't need to engage, but they can just kind of like watch. And I think having similar ways for students just to kind of like check out what's happening in some of your different events without feeling like they have to engage, potentially might allow for more people to check it out. But it just kind of spitballing some ideas. Like the more opportunities you have out there, obviously the more, hopefully more people will potentially try to engage and check it out.
Jan, any thoughts?
Following on from Benedict's comment, in the last couple of months, I've done some prayer guiding with adults outside Aston, and that issue of being on a Zoom call was relevant to that. Two of my retreatants actually preferred to have the conversation by telephone, and it was very obvious a number of times that this was taking place during that person's daily walk. So they were not at home, there was nobody listening, they were out there walking. So I think that's indicative of the need for privacy.
Just one final question from me to the panelists, and I think we have some time. I've been really conscious, and I think I've read somewhere that 10 million of the population will be dealing with grief or bereavement in some form, whether that's of somebody that's died, but grief and bereavement over other things as well around them. Have you got any ideas on how to capture memories, how to do memorials, and how to do it with new students coming in as well, so that balance of that transition community bit that goes on? Andrew.
Yes. So one of the things that LMH has is we have a record of the last pandemic, the 1918 flu pandemic, which the students, and there were only about 30 at the time, produced in thanksgiving for the staff who cared for them. The entire college got the flu, and one member of the college died, and the tutors nurse the students. So we have these beautiful books that they produced of poetry and prose and letters of thanks and artwork. We've written out to all our students and asked them if they would like to contribute to a future archive about the pandemic. And we've asked people to send us poetry, prose, journal entries, art, anything that we can really store up and have a future archive, because people are going to be studying this forever. So in a way, that's an opportunity to express emotional grief and loss. We've also started having conversations about what we might do in the coming term for those who've lost relatives and how we might memorialise those who've died. I'm not aware of any members of our student body who have died. I am aware of some parents and grandparents who've died, and mostly they've had their own funeral services already for those. An issue for us will be alumni, because normally when alumni die, we acknowledge that in some way. I'm assuming our development department will be keeping track of those who've died, and we will have to do something for those in the future, hopefully when we can go back into chapel.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything to add before we move into our breakout groups? Brilliant. Garry, can I hand over to you to tell us what we're doing in the breakout rooms?
Sure. So we've tried to give people a chance in groups of 4-ish or so to disappear off into breakout rooms. You might have something that's come up during the panel discussion that you particularly want to concentrate on, but I guess it would be really helpful to get a feel for what's the core thing that's in your mind about dealing with community and welcome when the new academic year begins. We know that's going to be really different for just about everyone. In the chat, for example, people are saying, well, I won't be near campus till Christmas, through to I've been on campus the whole while. So it's clearly going to be really different. Would help if you were able to focus on something like that, but equally we know there'll be other things.
So without further ado, can I ask group 1 for their key points in a focused minute?
I'm speaking for group 1. We had one person in our group who has only been in post for 3.5 weeks. So yes, and the summary of what we're all saying is basically, none of us really know what we're doing. We're not getting very clear instructions from our universities. There's a great deal of uncertainty. Yeah, I'm not sure that we came to any better conclusions than that, but that we're all trying to sort of get ourselves out there and concerned about how we connect with new students as opposed to the existing students with whom we already have relationships. But I'm afraid we didn't come up with any particularly positive ideas. It was more a sharing of a mutual uncertainty and lack of any clarity about how it's going to be.
Hopefully a sense of solidarity in that, at least.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephanie. Without further ado, group 2.
Hi there, Andy Marshall from the Royal Veterinary College. I mean, we had a lot of questions, and one of the themes that came up that we hadn't really heard a lot of people considering was thinking creatively about the use of outdoor space. So going for walks together, doing things like treasure hunts. If indoors is going to be a problem, let's think creatively about how we can use our outdoor space to build community.
Brilliant. Thank you. And succinct, Andy. Group 3.
If nobody else is going to say anything, we came to the conclusion that we're very dependent on what the university wants to do. And given that there's lots of we're all from different kinds of universities, we were agreed that none of us had the faintest idea of what was going to happen.
Thanks, Alison. Group 4.
Hi, I think I'm group 4. I don't do numbers very well, so here goes Fiona from the University of Hertfordshire. One of the things that we talked about is a potential which is reaching groups of people that haven't been reached before because we're operating in different ways. So connecting postgrad students into the community a bit more. At my uni, we've set up a virtual Facebook group for the students who've been stranded on campus, and that's proved a very useful platform. Somebody else suggested a WhatsApp group. And the other thing is, could we have a platform to share plans, ideas, best practice that potentially isn't a Zoom platform, because that's problematic depending on the Wi-Fi access people have got at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Fiona.
Group 5, Chris up in Sunderland. Lots of similar issues around space, what's anxiety about what we'd be allowed to use. A lot of people doing good stuff around memorialization and trying to find new ways of using the technology. Zoom and hymns is the way forward if you can't do beer and hymns. I think just opportunities to work regionally with students, because if things are on Zoom, then you can invite the Northeast students, LGBT plus community to come together. There are things we could do which we couldn't normally do. So there are some opportunities, but we're allowing ourselves the fact that it might be more of a fallow period because so much chaplaincy is face-to-face. Give yourselves a break if it's hard.
Thanks, Chris. Group 6.
I think that's us. We were talking about visibility as well, space. So one idea is having a tent outside. You can get them with heaters. We know it's not that ecological, but at least it's visibility. So it's just an idea. But
Group 7.
Just very quickly to say that I'm not a chaplain. I look after the secondary school chaplains for the Anglican Southwark Diocesan Board of Education, and this year I'm looking after the HEFE chaplain. So I came just to listen and learn, but I find myself speaking, so I'll be really brief. Our group made lots of interesting points that I learned a lot from them. I think the most important of which was talking about not worrying too much about coming up with the strategies and schemes, but thinking about the core of the role in terms of listening to God, being prayerful and being present, which I thought was really important. I just gave a quick summary of what our secondary school chaplains have been doing. Much smaller communities, they are inclusive, but obviously more distinctively Christian in our schools, which makes it a little bit easier. But they have been using whichever online platform is being used to deliver the lessons, Google, Classroom, Teams, whichever, to deliver weekly acts of worship to students. They've done Leavers services, they've done Founders Days, they've done weekly prayers and readings on staff bulletins, and some of them have put together worship sessions on YouTube, because then you can have contributions from students who are reading, staff who are reading, prayers shared as well. So Jeremy just asked me to just give a little flavour of what the secondary schools have been doing, so you know where they're coming from, I suppose, when they get to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Always good to hear another context alongside our own. Group 8.
I'm reporting for Group 8. We were lucky we had Benedict in our breakout room. And so our key points, as he highlighted, the importance of being in the schedule for Welcome Week and Freshers Fairs, and just to say what you can offer and to say it early so that you get in the schedule. And then also noted that this current context gives a bit more of an opening to collaborate with other teams across the institution that you might not normally get to collaborate with.
Thanks, Sarah. Group 9.
Yeah, I think I got that. So a lot of similar points from what we were hearing from all the other groups, but I think some of the big ones, recognizing that a lot of us and kind of everyone in general is starting to get a little exhausted from everything, and just kind of being aware of that, especially when a lot of you guys are being asked to basically like recreate things from scratch or try to figure out these new programs, recognizing kind of the exhaustion that's setting in, giving space to kind of deal with that, and a rest in that is important. We talked about like there's a lot of different opportunities to potentially take advantage of. Departments are being asked to kind of look at different ways to deal with things, and we talked about how a lot of the ways students interact with chaplaincy and learn about chaplaincy is through kind of more these informal events where they can kind of suss out what's going on and see if they feel like these are like safe places and safe people to open up to. So having more kind of informal events, whatever that looks like, is potentially a good way to kind of bring people in and allow them space to see what you guys offer. So things like that are kind of what we focused on.
Thank you. Group 10?
Yeah, that's me. I think we come from a slightly different perspective, I certainly do, where we're a very large university with 4 campuses and a very small team of chaplains. So we're actually embracing the fact that through digital platforms, we're going to make our chaplaincy more of a digital chaplaincy rather than a kind of physical one. We have our program still, but suddenly we can do more. And the reflection that was also coming through from others is that with the realization that with digital opportunities, we need to look at what we can do and actually stop resting on things we've always done and say, how can we be more diverse? How can we reach out to new students? How can we reach out more widely? And it offers new opportunities for Welcome Week and beyond, particularly for students who are anxious and kind of maybe not wanting to open the door of a physical building, but might feel able to come into a kind of a web chat, have the camera off, have the microphone muted, but still feel part of it until they feel confident enough to actually join in. We've seen that with Good
Thanks,
Grief
Richard.
Cafe.
That's your minute. Sorry.
That's fine.
I'm going to hold everyone to it. Group 11.
That's me. Hi, I'm Chris from Loughborough. In our group, we talked about bubble events. So if students are coming back onto campus, keeping them in their bubbles and hosting them either virtually or outside or wherever, but keeping them in their bubbles rather than looking at having those overlaps. We really hit on, any plan that you make can change tomorrow. And there is no real sense of solidity in our planning. Another rather lovely thought was that there's no such thing now as a simple question, because you think it's simple and then you find that there are another 10 questions to ask, to get answers to before you get an answer to your own question. And also, of course, the way that we support staff, a lot of the institutions are introducing voluntary severance schemes, and how we go about supporting staff in that sense in time of uncertainty and difficulty. And, distrust and bereavement are other key words that we need to be thinking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And last but not least, Group 12.
I think I'm the only one left from Group 12, so it better be me. We talked about a number of the things that others have shared, but I think probably the thing that came up most of all as a kind of consolation to ourselves was being able to acknowledge that whatever we offer at the moment, it may present new opportunities, but we don't necessarily have to assume that it will be splendid and shiny and brilliant. And in a lot of ways, what we're doing is second best to what we want to be doing, which is hanging out with people and eating pizza with them and all those other things. And we talk particularly about the difficulty, although online interaction may reduce some barriers, it actually increases others that you can't see as easily into the room before you go in. And even with meeting face-to-face with live events, we'll be so limited on the number of people who can attend because of room capacities and social distancing that it'll be harder to encourage people to drop in. We'll be demanding that students who are notoriously bad at booking anything in advance are intentional about what they're going to come to. And that's, I think, going to be a real challenge. So anything we can do outdoors, anything we can do that still allows those drop-in kinds of cultures, I think will become incredibly valuable. So we're going to be going on lots of walks.
Thank you. Thank everyone, and thank you for being so succinct in your feedback. It's always good to get a flavour of groups without letting any one group kind of steal all the time from everybody else. I found it really helpful to feel that sense of solidarity and shared experiences as we all try and imagine and reimagine what might be possible. There's a lot of head work and heart work and soul work going into this. And I'm sure there are going to be lots of practicalities that need sorting out before we actually get to welcome those new students, those returning students, whether it's virtually, on campus, in person, face to face, however it works for you. So whether you're going to be busy writing risk assessments or getting yourself into the university plans, may I wish you well with this. And I'll hand back to Garry.
Thanks ever so much. I think the fact that we had 50 odd people on the call is an indication of how much support we need. So I do hope that everyone's got a support package for yourself at a pastoral and prayerful and personal and professional level. I'm reminded that the New Zealand slogan during their pandemic was, if I've got it right, stay strong, be kind. And I think I want to put the emphasis on the second of those and pick up the theme that's come out of such a lot of people, which is, let's not be beating ourselves up remorselessly about what we can't do, and let's not be in agonies of anxiety about the fact that everything keeps changing every 2 minutes, generally in contradictory ways. But we're sent to be where we really are. And that's sometimes really uncomfortable for us and for the place where we are. So being kind to ourselves is a central part of our ministry to others. How are we going to expect them to do what we manifestly can't? So we're saying to them, be kind, don't worry about it. Let's get together where we are. Let's apply the same advice we would to our students and staff and others to ourselves. And then lastly, 3 quick things, and then I will stop. Sarah and I and colleagues on the CHELG committee will see if we can't find a way for people to more readily share stuff other than you emailing it all round. Don't know what the technical solution to that might be. It might even be something as simple as Google Docs, but we'll have a conversation about it offline. Secondly, in the chat, you'll have seen that I've said that the C of E's digital team is looking to produce material for Welcome Week, Freshers Week, whatever term you use. And it would be really great if you could let me know this would be really good, or alternatively, for God's sake, don't send us that, it will be awful. And if you have ideas you wanted to contribute, to offer those. And then lastly, my thanks to all of the colleagues here and those who couldn't make today's call. CHELG is having a look at what we do about induction for new chaplains and what we do for what would have been the CHELG National Chaplains Conference. So we're trying to do a bit of thinking about that over the summer, and we'll have more stuff to come out. So as I think Dave Allen used to say, goodbye, God bless, and may your God go with you. Thanks so much for being on the call.